Hello everyone and welcome back to DSP versus the Internet. Today is August 27, 2023, and this is part 5 of 6. We always split this up into about half an hour segments for you guys, make it a little bit more digestible. To start this part, I always review and see if we have any super members of the channel who have asked me a question, because I do a little bit of a Q&A segment at the end of this, or the beginning of this part, excuse me. We do have one, all right? I am going to read it. I'm going to answer it in part, but you'll see what I mean when I read the question, why I'm not going to go into crazy detail about this today, okay? So here we go. From a super member. Hey, Phil, you mentioned several times you grew up as a Roman Catholic. At what age did you end up moving away from faith? Did you ever attempt to encourage your parents to leave Catholicism as well? Did your parents ever force you to go to church when you were a teenager? Additionally, what's your perspective on parents forcing their kids to go to church? All right. I am not going to get massively into in-depth about this because, as I've said many times over the years as a content creator, there's a couple things that you have to be wise to. And one of the things that you got to be wise to is that there are certain topics that if you talk about, sadly, they become a big hotbed of contention. Okay? I kid you not. Earlier this year, I made an off-the-cuff joke about Jesus Christ being a zombie. It was not a serious joke. It was not meant to be a poke at anyone. It was just an innocent joke. And actually, people got offended. Okay? So even as simple as something like that could piss someone off, can you imagine if I talked at length about religion, right? There are some people out there that it's like, again, in their minds, it's my way or the highway. And if you don't agree with them on something like religion or politics, they will completely shut off to you and want nothing to do with you. Okay? So with that being the case, I'm not going to sit here and tell you a full-fledged story about my history with organized religion or anything like that. Now, what I will tell you is, probably in the future I will. At this point, I just don't feel like this is the proper climate for it, okay? Perhaps in the future, when things do get a little better, or people can be a little bit more open-minded, then maybe I would actually discuss this in general, all right? What I will do is I will answer the first part of your question, because I've already talked about this before, all right? I grew up as a Roman Catholic. I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I went to Catholic school all the way. Kindergarten, elementary school, even high school. It was all Catholic schools that I went to, okay? I went to church on the regular. The school was a Catholic, we went to Mass during school hours, all right? I got all the sacraments. Seriously, baptism, confession, communion, what else? Oh, confirmation. All those sacraments I had, okay? All under, the Roman Catholic deal, all of that. And basically, I was raised to be part of the Roman Catholic faith. All right? When I went to college, which actually was a Jesuit university, so again, it was Catholic, it was Christian, a Christian university that I went to. There was a course that I took there, and it was actually a course taught by a priest, a Roman Catholic priest. Okay? And basically, this course made me think differently about life, because you studied not just Catholicism and Christianity, but we studied Buddhism. We studied the Muslim religion. We studied Hinduism. Okay? There was like we covered a ton of different religions. And during that course, and this is just in a nutshell summary, this is not the end-all be-all of what the course was about. But in general, one of the running themes of this religious course that I took, World Religions, was that if you analyze most of the religions of the world, most, not all, but if you analyze most of the major religions on earth that people practice, you will find these commonalities between them, these themes that are underlying themes with all of these religions. Do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. That golden rule tenet is almost universal throughout all religions, okay? Don't kill people unless it's like self-defense. Do not kill. That's almost across the board accepted in all religions, okay? So when you start looking at the core principles and you realize, wait a minute, if every religion almost has identical morality code, right? Then does it really matter what the story behind it is? Because in Catholicism, right, you've got the Son of God who was incarnated into a man and had these powers. But then you go to a different religion and there was, a legendary prophet, and they did that, and they were special. And you go to another one, there was an enlightened person who learned all these things and passed it on to their disciples. Like, well, wait a minute. Does it matter the actual core story of how these morals and values got put onto mankind? Is it that's important? Or is it actually the morals and values that are important to begin with, right? So when you start looking at behind the scenes of every religion, they all are almost the same. And you come to find out the reason that this planet has been at odds for so long and why we have had entire wars, entire generations, entire cultures that were suppressed, entire awful things that have happened in human history. It's because of the semantics of how those morals are passed along. Right? Well, I thought that this was God. Well, I always thought that this was God. And I thought that this was God. Let's all kill each other over it. Didn't your actual moral code in your religion say do not kill? So you ignored the rules of your own religion to spread your religion just to say that that particular way, that the morals that you're trying to teach were spread this way by this one particular person or this idea of God. You see what I'm saying? It was also very hypocritical. And this one course completely opened my eyes to all of that. Okay? Now, the funny part is, a lot of people assume about me that I'm not a religious person, and they make a lot of assumptions about things. And I think one day we'll actually sit down together and we'll have a conversation about it. All right? Like I said, I don't think today is the right day. I don't think that people are ready in my content to talk about religion. I actually worry that sadly there would be people that if I were to open up and actually talk about this in a way that, portraying, all these things that I believe in things over time, that people might get the wrong idea. Because I think sadly in humanity in general has gone so far towards the organized religion deal that they don't understand that that's supposed to be like the side shit, that the morals and values were the important things. And if you're living your life by a moral code and a code of values and things, then that's more important than the story of how those values got put upon mankind, right? So, yeah, like, I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about the ins and outs and the specifics of anything, because I do feel people will be offended. I'm serious. There are people out there who will be outright offended if I were to say something, all right? So one day we'll go more into detail about it, all right? But I'll tell you this, like, I know I certainly am not without any kind of religious thoughts. I still have a lot of times that I think back to the morals and values that I was taught when I was growing up. I've talked on this very show, I've talked about my idea of charity and how my idea of what I believe charity is very different than probably what a lot of people out there believe, because that's how I was raised, right? So one day we'll get into it. I'm not going to go crazy into it today because I just don't think it's the right time. But I was just talking about this on my podcast earlier today, that as I get older, likely what will happen is we will start to branch into these topics. Why? Because when I get older, my audience is going to get older. And when my audience gets older with me, they'll want to talk about those topics and they'll be more mature enough to handle it. As I've gotten older, what I've realized is it's okay to have a difference of opinion, and it's okay to look at something from a different perspective, and it's also okay to agree to disagree. You don't have to hate someone because they have a different belief about politics or religion than you do. You can just say, you know what, that's one thing we disagree on, but you know what, I could still watch your content, I could still have a conversation with you, I could still like you as a person and just not like that one aspect of what we don't have to agree on that, but we could still be respectful of each other. But sadly, a lot of people aren't. A lot of people in this life are black and white. Oh, if you're not with me, you're against me. So because of that, that's why I don't like going into those topics, okay? So today, I'm not going to go any further than that, but maybe one day we will. Okay. Thank you for the question. Without further ado, let us move further into reacting to videos. Let's see what's next.
For a minute, and I want to hear your opinion. Would you take 500,000?
Wait, we already did this, didn't we? Did we not already watch this clip? I think we did, didn't we? I swear we already watched it. Look, it's short. I swear we already watched it though.
Or dinner with Jay-Z.
Man, give me $500,000. Fuck Jay-Z. Yeah, man. Yeah, nigga, give me $500,000. Man, I don't want. Who want to take a sit down with Jay-Z over $500,000?
You'd be surprised.
It's some people say they want to sit on his lap then. Yeah, they want to jump
Now that's a good take. They only want to meet Jay-Z because they want to sit on his lap. They like him. There, yeah. There you go.
On his lap and talk to him like he's Santa Claus.
There you go.
Just tell me what you know, Jay-Z. No, nigga, I don't want to know a month. Give me that 500,000. I know what to do with this here now.
That's a great take. That's an absolute great take right there. I love that. Ooh. We've heard this guy before many months ago, did we not? The A-Capella guy, he makes sound effects with his hands and stuff in his mouth and, you know, snapping. Yeah, listen, that's cool. Wind Waker. Wind Waker HD, which is the version I play. Mr. Whiskers, I didn't miss that. I shout those out between the parts, but bro, we don't do that live. We do it between the parts of the show. Okay. It's nice. But he ruins it by wearing 2 different colors of hats. Completely ruins it. He blew himself up. How did they get my gameplay footage? Why they got my footage of me blowing myself up playing the game and sucking? How dare you? Wind Waker really is a big departure, right? Remember, we saw the making of Wind Waker on the show previous, and they said how it was a big risk. They didn't know how people were going to accept it because it was so different from the other Zeldas. And everyone was like, oh, it's going to be a kiddie game or whatever. It's super good, though. I really liked Wind Waker. I didn't know if I was going to like it. And I played it. I loved it. I actually really enjoyed the high seas, like exploring the high seas. Seeing that stuff out in the distance, trying to figure out, can I do that yet? Or is there a puzzle later I gotta solve when I have an ability? That was really neat. Smooth McGroove, this guy's name is, by the way. A lot of bumping. What's funny is I did similar stuff like this in previous things that I edited. Remember DSP tries it, goes, DSP tries it. So that was me and my voice going, DSP tries it, DSP tries it, DSP tries it, and just superimposing it over itself to play at the same time so it sounds like a crowd of people saying it at once. That's essentially what he does. He's just doing different components of the song and then editing it together and playing it over itself to make a big tapestry of sound. It's really neat. He's good.
So by now, we all know the story of Sony getting into the console market with their iconic system, the PlayStation, and they had an iconic controller to go along with it, one that we all recognize today, but also look at and say, you know, that's kind of archaic. There is no joysticks on it or anything there, and it's a very light,
the original
simplistic
Sony
controller overall. But they did work on this throughout the generation, of course, that being the introduction of the DualShock controller. This brought in the 2 joysticks that we all know now, and then it also had the rumble motors on each handle. But there was a controller that released that slotted in perfectly between these two, and it's one that most people didn't own, let alone ever heard of, and that was Sony's dual analog controller. And today I want to talk about the dual analog controller, what made it a bit different, and why a lot of people just forgot about it. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it.
I couldn't pause. It was fucked up. No, I had that. I totally had that controller. I remember the indented thumbstick on it. And it wasn't that good, because what happened is at first it was nice, but after you used it for a little while, the thumbstick wore out real fast, and it was like very slippery. So I think that's why they redesigned it.
And the biggest thing that set them apart was that joystick on the Nintendo 64 controller that, the whole thing looked weird, but in use, it was pretty cool to have that joystick paired with something like Mario 64. Clearly, Sony noticed this as just a few months later at the PlayStation Expo, they showed off their dual analog controller for the first time. And in fact, we have a quote here from Next Generation magazine where they say most exciting on the hardware front was Sony's new dual joystick analog pad. Displayed under glass, it features 2 analog sticks, which also function as buttons. An NG representative was one of only a few attendees allowed to test it, and it feels great. The pad also has solenoid-driven feedback mechanism, isn't nearly as sophisticated as the technology behind Immersion's force feedback stick, but it should add a nice kick to many types of games. Now, the interesting thing about this comes down to the release dates for a lot of this stuff. This came out a few months later in April of 97
I totally had it.
in
I
Japan.
totally remember.
Then it came out a few months after that in the US. However, around the time this released in the US and Europe, the DualShock controller came out in Japan, and then it followed up into the US. So it's not surprising that this would have kind of gotten overlooked, because when it went outside of Japan, they removed the rumble motors. It's very strange that they would do that, and there's still not really a consensus as to why. There's speculation that it could have had to do with patents in general that were pending or were unsure outside of Japan, and they just decided.
So he's saying it didn't have. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it had rumble. I remember having it because I remember at first I was like, oh, this is cool. There's thumbsticks similar to, the thumbstick that was on the N64 controller, and you could play Sony games. It worked better for a lot of games where there was like top-down shooting, where you could move in a full 360 area. But yeah, I guess it didn't have rumble. The DualShock added the rumble. But I didn't like it because the thumbsticks wore out too fast. They looked good, but they basically wore out right away. They would have like all the texture would wear out, and it would get like real sticky. You know how I've talked about how over time these things that are faux rubber or rubberized parts of controllers can wear out over the years? That shit wore out like within a few months. I remember. So that's probably why they replaced it with the DualShock. Okay, onward.
The average American fire truck spans 40 feet, is 10 feet wide, and 12 feet tall. And their international competitors are usually much, much more compact. Not to mention, the US one just looks old. It's a difference that's resulted in contrasting approaches to firefighting. Bigger might not always be better. American fire trucks weren't always this massive. During colonial times, most homeowners kept buckets on their front porch.
Oh, there you go.
And when members of the Rattle Watch would raise the alarm, citizens would form bucket brigades and pass the buckets from the water source to the fire.
Right. Yeah.
Now, this obviously required a lot of cooperation, and clearly wasn't that efficient. So in 1721, Richard Newsham patented a type of fire pump.
What happened to his eyes? Why does he have no eyeballs? What the hell kind of picture is that? What happened? Was he born with no eyes? If so, that's really impressive that he made that if he has no eyeballs.
The pump was mobile,
what happened?
Mounted on a wooden chassis. But bucket brigades would still have to dump water into the hopper. So, as you can imagine, these weren't the most effective either. Firefighters would show up late to a scene, often exhausted from lugging around all the equipment. In many cases, fires died out before the brigade even arrived.
Wow.
By the turn of the 19th century, larger U.S. cities relied on horse-drawn wagons with steam-powered water pumps. Finally, the internal combustion engine allowed for the introduction of the fire truck, which hit the roads in the early 1900s. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, American cities began growing taller and taller, and this presented a new kind of challenge. So, New York firefighter Daniel Hayes designed the Hayes ladder, which was mounted directly on the fire truck and could be raised
and that's why they all have ladders now.
In the years following World War II, fire departments added these so-called cherry pickers to their trucks. This bucket attached to a bending arm allowed firefighters to position themselves closer to previously unreachable corners of buildings. Both ladders and the cherry pickers required a larger, sturdier chassis. From then on, the fire truck continued to grow larger as each new model was designed to house more equipment.
Damn, that's a
Today,
huge one.
the average truck is loaded with pumps, hydraulic ladders, tanks that can hold roughly 400 to 500
There's the
gallons
fire
of
right
water,
there.
and a slew
That's
of other
probably like a
equipment.
vendor, street vendor.
Also, the term fire truck has come to encompass a variety of search and rescue vehicles like ladder trucks, engines, and tiller trucks. But regardless of the specification, almost all American fire trucks are larger.
Yeah, huge.
And that comes with a larger price. The average cost of a widely used Type 1 engine goes anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000.
Not surprising for the size and the amount of stuff on it.
A 100-foot aerial ladder alone goes for around $1 million. That's a
Whoa.
big price tag when few of the calls forwarded to fire departments are actually fire related. Of the 36.6 million calls made to all of the US fire departments in 2021, only 1.3 million, or about 4%, were fire.
A lot of these are rescue calls, right?
A large
Someone's
majority of
under
the other
duress.
calls are to accompany ambulances to the scene of auto accidents and other medical emergencies.
Right.
Beyond the price tag, heavy-duty vehicles like fire trucks can pose risks to smaller cars, pedestrians, and cyclists. They're heavier and have a longer braking distance. Heavy-duty trucks make up just 4% of all vehicles on American roads, yet they account for 7% of pedestrian fatalities.
Whoa, they do?
And 11% of bicycle fatalities.
I had no idea the statistic was
In
that
the summer
high.
of 2018, lawmakers in Baltimore pushed for the addition of bike lanes, which would in turn create narrower street lanes for cars. But the Baltimore Fire Department opposed the proposal, releasing a 9-minute video suggesting bike lanes would impede their ability to maneuver to a scene. The 10-foot wide American fire truck struggles to squeeze through traffic on the average 10 to 12-foot wide American road lanes, especially in older cities with thinner, more congested streets. So what should a fire truck look like? Well, maybe like this. In Europe, streets tend to be tighter, so fire trucks are shorter, narrower, and more compact.
Way
making
smaller.
them
Look at
far
that, it's like
more
half the
maneuverable.
size.
Their aerial ladder fire trucks can also reach just as high as the American counterpart.
So why the hell are we so inefficient over here, right? What's our problem? Why can't we downscale to something more compact?
Even though they're a third shorter. In Singapore, fire trucks, or so-called red rhinos, are even more compact. Yet they still have the space to fit 5 people, a medical technician and 4 firefighters, and also all the necessary medical equipment. Now, some places like Beaufort County in South Carolina have already opted for smaller all-purpose response vehicles. In 2010, its fire department had to replace 3 fire trucks, which would have cost them $1.4 million
Holy
total.
shit.
Instead, the department bought 1 new fire truck and replaced the other 2 with all-purpose cars the size of a pickup truck, paying just $675,000. San Francisco's fire department currently also uses smaller Vision Zero engines that
Okay, so I guess what they're saying is in the United States, they basically don't need as many giant fire trucks as we have. We have way too many. But the misconception was that every time that the fire department gets called, they're being called to put out a fire. But in general, it's not true at all. It's only about a third of the time that they're being called to put out a fire. Therefore, you don't need every vehicle at the fire department to be a full-on fire truck, right? You can have, like they said, all-purpose vehicles to get the technicians out there fast to assess what's going on. Maybe there's a car accident. You need the fire department to get the jaws of life to get the door open and save the person. You don't need a full fire truck for that. Okay, so that's honestly what all American fire departments should do. They should reassess their whole fleet of cars and say, realistically, how many fires are we actually fighting? Why does every vehicle need to be a giant truck? Let's maybe have a third to half of our vehicles be that, and the other half be more quick response units for other kinds of problems. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was interesting. That was actually fascinating. Like I said, this week, I feel like the variety of videos this week has been much greater. And we're actually, like, I've learned some stuff this week. I had a good time so far on the show because I feel like good stuff this week, good variety. So keep that up. If you're a channel member, please keep up this level of variety. I think this has been a really cool week so far. All right, so ladies and gents, one part left. We are almost done. We're in the grand finale stretch, right? The home stretch of DSP versus the internet. Thank you all for your submissions. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you back in part 6, the final part for this week. And consider becoming a member because the members will be nominating the videos for next week. Thanks a lot. See you in the next part.